They say it will be the trial of the century, dwarfing even O.J. Simpson. The Charlie Kirk murder case was televised on cable news channels and beyond last week. Now, people are beginning to wonder, will it be televised all the way through, and what will that do for ratings? But folks, we're not so ghoulish. We're not so craven as to be raising that kind of a question so early on. Rather, what we're here to do is say, should it happen? Should it go that way? Should the trial ethically and legally be televised? Folks, welcome back to the channel where we raise, we rise, we lift up the conversation, and we're happy to do so. Welcome back. A video of excellence with a panel of experts. Ron Coleman is here. We're going to weigh in, give you our thoughts on whether or not LawTube and the cable news networks should be gifted a chance to watch every single day live the Charlie Kirk trial, where, murder has happened, of course. Folks, we may shock you with our response. Don't go anywhere. Click the like button. Tell us down in the comments whether you think it should be televised or not. We've got all angles. We've got all sides of it. Let's dive in right now. All right, out of the Hollywood Reporter, TV ratings, cable news spikes with coverage of the Charlie Kirk murder. Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN all drew larger audiences than usual on Wednesday and Thursday. This is by Rick Porter. Now, this would be a ghoulish topic if we are here to talk about what a national tragedy will do with ratings on news networks. That's not what we're here for. We're going to ask a very important question. Hang on just one moment. In primetime Wednesday, the three networks collectively averaged 6.89, basically 7 million viewers, a 65% jump from the 4.17 who watched a week earlier. Thursday's combined audience of 6.2 million was up 72%. Per usual, Fox News held big leads over its rivals, and they just wiped the floor with them. But that's not what we're here for, folks, because there's a bigger question at stake, and we've got Ron Coleman here to help us understand what's going on. Yeah. Ron, part of what is driving viewership on the news is the other day we had the killer on TV for the televised, I guess the what would we call that first step that they take? Is that the arraignment?
Yeah.
Okay, so the televised arraignment. And so one of the things I'm curious about, Ron, is this is in the state of Utah. It seems to me that this can be televised. It doesn't necessarily have to be televised. And what I'm wondering is, from a legal standpoint and from an ethical standpoint, what do you think? Because the news channels, maybe even the networks, will cover this. I don't know if this is going to be like the OJ trial, because it doesn't have the celebrity status necessarily, but in other ways it does. It's also gruesome and terrible and awful.
I think this is bigger than OJ.
I think it is bigger than OJ. Okay, you're right. Exactly. Okay, so Ron, here's the question. Should it be? Should this be televised? What are the pros and cons in your mind of putting this on the air? Does it do more harm or does it do more good?
That's a great question. I'm ambivalent on the topic of televised trials. I think they distort the process. I also think there is an argument for there is an argument that the only thing worse than televised trials is untelevised trials. I don't like the idea that this cold-blooded murderer will possibly have the opportunity to become a TV star.
Right. I wish he had a bag on his head, a sandwich bag.
Yeah, full of water. It's a real tough call, and if it's up to the judge, if I were the judge, what decision would I make? Man, that is a tough call. I have one of my best friends is former CBS Vice President Jeff Balaban, who was very involved. He was also with Channel 1 in New York in the early days. Very involved with lobbying. He's actually a professional lobbyist, lobbying the court systems around the country to televise more trials. And now, where I practice in New York and New Jersey, trials are not televised, and I think we're better off for it. But this is really a matter of great public interest. On the other hand, we had these, we did have these superstar trials in New York the last couple of years, and I do think that there's something less sensational about having Joe Neerman wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and, running out during breaks and streaming, then sort of the public execution aspect of it. I at the end of the day, my decision would be not to televise. If it were up to me, and I think some of my free speech friends would be unhappy with me, I don't think the concept of open courts is the same thing as broadcast proceedings. I think it's problematic.
I've got a question for you, Ron, because I'm curious about this. I remember back during the OJ trial, it became such a farce that they had the dancing Edos on the late night shows at that time. But how would you feel about just broadcasting the audio? Because I think that gives you a different experience, and it doesn't necessarily sensationalize the trial.
Well, that's a really good question, Lauren. That's what the Supreme Court does. You can listen to oral argument, but you can't watch oral argument. And one reason it's a good principled distinction is that I think psychologically there's something different, but also part of what has corrupted our culture is the obsession with the visual. Everything has to be a treat. Our eyes have to constantly be entertained. So that would be a proposal that I think might be, because after all, what do you lose? What do you lose? Well, I want to see the guy on the stand. I want to see, I want to hear, the people, the online, the law streamers talk about how this one looks like he's lying, and this one, frankly, none of my friends, but there are plenty of people who do law streaming who are full of shit. That their views on what people look like, whether they look like they're being credible, whether they look like they're coached, are no better than my grandma's.
Well, I think there's something to be said, too, for the fact that if you are listening to an argument as opposed to watching it, it does require a little bit more mental participation, let's say. It requires more focus and nuance. And for those people who aren't looking for the sensational, there's a likelihood that they'll tune out because it's boring in their opinion.
My objection is not to the actual trial proceedings, but to all the commentators telling you what they think you just saw. That certainly happened during OJ a lot, and it's only happening worse now with every news story. I don't really want the news equivalent of a Jimmy Kimmel sitting there telling you, well, that guy's lying, because it's not up to him, and it's not up to him to tell you.
Yeah, I remember during OJ when that was the beginning of that thing of having mostly lawyers opine, second guess, and I do think there are people who absolutely lend genuine insight, and there are procedural things that need explanation that civilians aren't going to get if someone doesn't explain them. And I do think that I think that part you can pick and choose, and you can also, like people used to say, well, why do the play-by-play announcers have to talk so much? Turn off the sound. You just want to watch the game, just turn off the sound. You can't really do that with the trial without getting up, constantly turning, muting and unmuting. These are issues that I think are going to be discussed a lot, since I guess the Utah judge has to make that decision. There's someone's life is going to be decided by a jury and a judge in that Utah courtroom. And the idea that it's going to be a public spectacle, as opposed to an open, non-private, non-confidential, I think the world isn't just divided into either, secret star chambers and invasive audio-visual spectacles. I think it might very well be possible, and Lauren's idea might be one approach to take, to find a compromise where we maintain dignity, and I think we have to wrestle with that.
Ron, the underlying principle, as you're stating it, I think, and you tell me if I've got this figured out. What you're saying is you want transparency, but not a circus.
Yeah, but that where and how to draw that line, I will acknowledge is tricky.
So here's an idea, and panel, you tell me what you think about it. One idea is, and I don't know if this may be legally laughable, so we may be just talking about it from a philosophical standpoint, but Erica Kirk, what does she want? That would be high on my mind in this. Now, I don't know if that has any weight with the court whatsoever, but I just think about, the people who are going to be most impacted and most emotional about this and who have been traumatized already. I would have some due deference to them and say, what is it that they're going to be put through? Do I want them to have to be on the stand televised for the nation? Do they want to be televised to the nation to explain what has happened to them? That I think that has to be on the minds, but maybe it doesn't. Lou, you seem to disagree with that. What say you?
I think the bigger effect that we're not mentioning, and Ron would know better than I, how does this change the expectations of juries in all trials when they watch a trial like this as to how things should be or shouldn't be, or what they think they know about the law because somebody said something in that famous trial?
Well, let me bring, I spoke at the National Conservatism Conference in Washington 3 weeks ago. And my talk was on the topic of how judges are affected by invasive and real-time media and social media, how different it is from when I started out in the profession, and how the judiciary forms consensus on certain issues hastily because of the immediacy of communication across the country now. And you bring up a very good point. How does, what is it? The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, is it?
Yeah.
No, Heisenberg, but that the observer, it's impossible to remove the fact of observation from the formula of what happens
right
in the experiment that's being observed.
That's right, folks. Ron Coleman, expert in law, science, and quantum physics.
And one hell of a little dancer, or so they say.
Let me get Derek in here because you guys have inspired me. I did not have this on my mind. Derek, you may not have it on your mind. I bet you don't, but because you don't know what I'm going to ask yet. LawTube. That had never even entered into my thought process before discussing this. There's an entire ecosystem of LawTube that would explode if this is televised. That doesn't happen if it's not. What are your thoughts on that? And do you see that as good or bad in the new media? Because that's a new media opportunity. I don't know if it's a good one or a bad one.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have also come to distrust the media spin, right? And so sometimes you want more trusted voices to cover, what you're correct would be the biggest trial of the century. I mean, nothing's bigger, OJ before, but I mean, this is huge. So I think you would want more trusted voices to cover this. You don't want to hear from the talking heads on mainstream media. That's it. And, they're the ones that are going to have most of the access, because they have the money to get out there and go to Utah and set up cameras outside the courtroom. So as soon as something happens in the courtroom, they would rush out and discuss it. So to have this on public display for everybody to watch, and then for the law tubers to be able to go and make commentary as the trial is unfolding, as we're hearing evidence and different types of information, I think that would be vital for their channels, obviously, but then also, again, just vital for trusted voices to speak on this instead of just getting information second, third hand or whatever. I also believe that we absolutely should make sure that I want a public trial. This was a public murder. And I believe that it has to be. I know it can turn into a circus, and hopefully they find a way to keep some of the nonsense. There's going to be protesters outside the courtroom.
But a good judge could really make all the difference, Derek.
Yeah.
That's really the key. If a judge is not Lance Ito, and the opportunity for a good judge to actually inspire confidence in the system, as opposed to what we have seen so often, would be, might be worth it, even if there's a circus aspect to the whole thing.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I want to get the super chat up on the screen. We don't typically do this to break into the segment with the super chat, but It's better than any question that I've asked, so I think we should do it. Ace for 20 says it should be televised to make sure everything is kosher. The reason is Rittenhouse could have been railroaded if not for everything. The cult news media had lied about Kyle and will lie about this case to keep the narrative.
Yeah.
Guys, your thoughts on this one? I mean, is it
a
good point?
It's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's an example I kind of forgot about until this guy brought it up, and it's a very good one. So
accountability was something I wasn't thinking about. When I hear a public trial, all I can think about is, the entire country was obsessed with Marsha Clark's bangs for how many months with the OJ trial, and it became like a celebrity thing instead of like the trial of an actual murder. And because of that, a killer was able to walk free. A situation like this could actually keep the mainstream media accountable by people in the new media being able to say, here's exactly what was said. Here's exactly what was done.
I think it's worth thinking about. I think one of the reasons that people may not be considering that right now is because of how obvious this one is. Everybody's given the presumption of innocence. In this case, we're doing that on a philosophical standpoint and axiomatic, but for all intents and purposes, pretty much this is we know it. So that's where we are, and so I don't know if it needs that sort of protective filter of full, total transparency through access for television. I don't know, but folks, we'll continue to keep an eye on this one. We'll let you know. This is something I don't think people are considering yet, but cable news channels may live or die by whether or not this is televised. It's a morbid thing to talk about in some ways because we have not even yet had the opportunity to fully remember Charlie Kirk. And whatever happens in this, the one thing that I really and truly hope for is that we remember the words of Charlie Kirk, not that we remember the trial of the murder of Charlie Kirk. We have to do whatever it takes to keep his message foremost in our memory, not some sort of circus that happens afterwards. I think that would be a tragedy, a travesty for him. Guys, final thoughts before we go. Anybody got anything else? I don't want to cut anybody off. Well, with all hearts and minds cleared, but definitely not even close to empty because they're still full of the kind of IQ you need to know. We really hope that you felt this video was satisfactual. We know we had an actual good time participating and communicating with each and every one of you out there listening. It is a great honor. It is a great pleasure, even a responsibility to do this on a daily basis. You give us the dream job we love doing, and for that we can never say thank you enough. There's only one small favor we ask beyond what has already been done, and that is, folks, consider it. That is clicking the like button. Share, subscribe, click it, stick it to those pesky algorithms. It's the notification bell, and drop a comment right on down below. Let us know your thoughts because your thoughts do indeed matter, no matter what the mainstream media would otherwise say. Folks, as we say every single time we end these videos, because we mean it, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Jump into the water!
Why listen to music made by people and companies who really don't like you? Check out Vacation Radio today and prepare for all new content made by the people behind the WDW Pro Channel. It's the place you need for all the music. That should be fun. Hundreds of songs, every genre you can imagine. Listen live on YouTube and enjoy a set list that's always sunny. It's Vacation Radio. What are you waiting for? Every WDW Pro video has a link to Vacation Radio in the video description. Try it out and subscribe today.
3 days of you